The throne room of the Veyari Empire glimmered like a sea of glass. Tall pillars stretched toward the ceiling, carved from crystal that caught the light of the twin suns above the capital city. Courtiers in flowing robes lined the chamber, their jeweled masks hiding every flicker of expression. They waited silent and watchful as Princess Lithera rose from her throne. Her violet eyes scanned the gathering with an air of calm curiosity, though inside her heart beat faster than she wished to admit. Among the guests stood a small group of humans, their uniforms plain compared to the dazzling attire of the Veyari nobles. They were envoys from Earth led by Captain Darius Holt, a man whose steady posture made him appear taller than he was. His dark hair was tied back, his jaw set with quiet confidence. The princess had been studying him since the moment he entered her court, fascinated by the difference between his people and hers. For hours they had spoken of trade, alliances, and defense. The usual formalities filled the air, yet her mind drifted elsewhere. Lithera had heard stories about humans, how they could endure more than any race her empire had ever encountered. They healed quickly, they adapted to harsh environments, and they rebuilt even after devastating wars. Her tutors had called them reckless. Her guards had called them dangerous. But Lithera saw something else, a mystery. And so, without warning, she asked the question that would silence the room. "Tell me, Captain Holt," she said, her voice carrying across the chamber, "how often can a human reproduce?" The words hung in the air like a blade. A ripple of shock passed through the court. Some nobles shifted uneasily, their jeweled masks turning toward her in disbelief. Others whispered behind sleeves of silk, their voices sharp with disapproval. Even the guards at her side stiffened, unsure if they had heard her correctly. Only the humans reacted differently. Several of them exchanged glances, their lips twitching as if struggling to suppress laughter. Captain Holt's stern expression cracked for the first time, and a grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. The princess tilted her head, unbothered by the reaction. "Is my question unclear?" she asked, her tone as calm as if she had inquired about the weather. "I wish to understand the limits of your people. Do not mistake curiosity for insult." Holt stepped forward, bowing his head slightly. "Your Highness," he said, his voice steady but touched with humor, "your question is perfectly clear, but I fear my answer may be more shocking than you expect." A wave of whispers surged again, but Lithera raised her hand and silence fell. She leaned forward, her eyes fixed on him, her curiosity sharper now than ever. "Then answer," she commanded softly. Holt nodded, folding his hands behind his back. "Among my people, the ability to reproduce is constant. We are not bound by long cycles or rare seasons as many species are. For us, the drive exists nearly every day, throughout most of our lives." Gasps filled the chamber. A noble dropped his jeweled goblet, the crystal shattering against the floor. The courtiers recoiled, some muttering about exaggeration, others shaking their heads in disbelief. To them, the concept was absurd. The Veyari, like many species in the galaxy, relied on narrow cycles for reproduction, limited to rare alignments of biology and season. The idea that humans could do so endlessly seemed unnatural, dangerous even. Lithera, however, did not flinch. Her eyes widened only slightly as she considered his words. She studied him, noticing the way he held himself with both pride and patience, as though he knew exactly what storm his answer had unleashed. "So," she said slowly, her voice echoing across the crystalline chamber, "you are telling me that your kind possesses no restraint? That at any moment, under any circumstance, you might create new life?" "Not without choice," Holt replied quickly, his smile fading into a serious expression. "We are guided by will, not only by instinct. But the potential is always there, and that potential," he paused, glancing around at the wide-eyed nobles, "is part of what makes us who we are, persistent, adaptable, unstoppable." The court erupted again, louder this time. The whispers turned into heated murmurs. Some accused the humans of lying, of exaggerating their own abilities. Others muttered that such a species was too reckless to be trusted with power. The tension rose like heat in the chamber, pressing against Lithara's skin, but she did not share their fear. Instead, she felt a strange rush of excitement, as though she had just uncovered a secret truth that had been hidden from her people for centuries. Her gaze lingered on Captain Holt, and for a fleeting moment a smile touched her lips. The princess's curiosity had only deepened. And though her court could not see it, She already sensed that this question and the answer would change far more than the mood of a single day. For the first time in her life, Lithera looked at a human not as an envoy, not as a curiosity, but as something far more dangerous and far more promising. The throne room remained restless long after Captain Holt gave his answer. The nobles whispered, their jeweled masks flashing in the light as they exchanged sharp words. Some called the humans dangerous. Others accused the princess of insulting the dignity of her empire. The tension was thick, almost suffocating, but Princess Lithara did not waver. Her eyes stayed on Holt, her curiosity burning brighter than the disapproval around her. Your people are different, she said softly, though her words carried across the hall, not bound by limits, not tied to the slow chains of nature as we are. You exist with freedom in your own bodies. A noble stepped forward, his silver robe sweeping the floor. Your Highness, he said sternly, these humans exaggerate. They wish to impress you with tales of excess and recklessness. It is in their nature to boast. Holt's lips curved into a small, patient smile. He did not rise to the insult. Instead, he bowed his head slightly toward the noble, his voice calm. Believe what you will, my lord, but our endurance is not just a tale. It is proven in our history. Again and again, humanity has rebuilt itself even after disaster. Where others fall, we rise. Where others wait for the right moment, we act. His words stirred a fresh wave of murmurs. Some scoffed, others frowned. Yet a few lowered their heads as if uncertain. Princess Lithara watched closely. She had grown up surrounded by voices like these, rigid, careful, unwilling to see beyond their narrow view of the galaxy. And now, a man stood before her who spoke with pride and certainty, unafraid of the judgment around him. She found herself leaning forward slightly on her throne. You speak with conviction, Captain Holt, but conviction alone does not prove truth. Tell me, if your people are so unbound, why does the galaxy not already kneel to you? The chamber went silent. Even her advisors shifted uncomfortably, for her words could have been taken as a challenge. Holt, however, did not flinch. His eyes met hers, steady and unwavering. Because, Princess, he said, his voice low but firm, we do not seek to rule. We seek to survive, to endure, to grow. Power for us is not found in ruling others. It is found in never giving up, no matter the odds. For a long moment, no one spoke. Lithara felt a strange weight in her chest as she considered his answer. It was not the response of an empire-hungry conqueror. It was the voice of someone who had seen struggle and had chosen to endure rather than dominate. She felt something stir in her that she could not easily name. Respect, perhaps, or a deeper kind of fascination. But her court was not convinced. Another noble stepped forward, his jeweled mask glinting with disdain. Your Highness, do you not see? These humans are creatures of chaos. If what they say is true, then they are a species without restraint. How can such beings be trusted? How can we place our faith in those who live only by impulse? Holt's expression hardened. Impulse? No, a choice. That is the difference. We are not slaves to cycles or seasons. We decide when to build families, when to fight, when to create. That freedom gives us strength. That choice makes us dangerous, yes, but it also makes us capable of hope, even in the darkest of times. The words settled over the chamber like a weight, pressing into every listener. Some looked away, unwilling to face the truth in them. Lithera, however, could not look away. She rose slowly from her throne, her flowing robes catching the crystalline light. Her movement silenced the chamber at once. Every eye turned to her as she walked down the steps, her gaze fixed on Holt. You fascinate me, Captain, she admitted, her voice clear. Your people fascinate me. From the moment I heard of humans, I thought of you as reckless children of the stars. Yet as you speak, I see something else. A fire that my people lack. The nobles gasped, their whispers turning into sharp protests. Some even stepped forward as if to argue. But Lithera raised her hand and the chamber fell quiet again. Holt bowed his head slightly, his voice respectful. Your Highness, we are not perfect. We stumble, we fight among ourselves, we fail more times than I can count. But we do not stop. That is who we are. For the first time in her life, Lithera smiled openly in her throne room. It was a small smile, but it carried more weight than the most lavish ceremony. Her eyes softened as she looked at him, though her voice remained strong. Then perhaps, she said, it is not recklessness I see, but resilience. And resilience may be what this empire needs most of all. Her words hung in the air like a spark in dry wood, the chamber filled with unrest, but she had no mind. Her attention lingered on Holt, and in that silent exchange something shifted between them. The court saw only danger, but Lithera saw possibility, and though no one yet understood it, the question she had asked and the answer she had received was the beginning of something far greater than curiosity. It was the first step toward a bond that could change the fate of both their worlds. The days after the strange question and the human's bold answer did not pass quietly in the Veyeri court. Rumors spread through the palace corridors like wildfire. Some nobles whispered that the princess had lost her sense, charmed by alien words. Others warned that the humans were tricksters, weaving lies to gain favor in the empire. Yet through it all, Princess Lithera carried herself with calm dignity, though her thoughts were far from still. She found her mind returning again and again to Captain Holt's words. His explanation of human resilience and choice lingered in her heart, like an echo she could not silence. She had grown up believing her people were the pinnacle of civilization, disciplined, refined, and wise. But now she wondered if their restraint had become a prison rather than a strength. Late one evening, as the twin suns dipped below the horizon, Lithara left the glittering throne room and made her way to the gardens. The air was cool, filled with the soft hum of crystal flowers that glowed faintly under the starlight. There, beneath the canopy of alien trees, she found Captain Holt walking quietly with two of his officers. They bowed when they noticed her, their eyes watchful but respectful. "Captain," she said, her voice calm but carrying a thread of warmth, "I wish to speak with you alone." Holt exchanged a glance with his officers, then nodded. They stepped back, leaving him with the princess among the flowers. For a moment silence filled the space between them, broken only by the whisper of leaves. Lithara studied him, her violet eyes reflecting the starlight. "You must know," she began, "that your words have stirred more than curiosity in my people. Many think you dangerous. Many believe I was foolish to listen." Holt gave a small smile, though it did not quite reach his eyes. "I've been called dangerous before. Humans often are, but I'll take dangerous over helpless any day." Her lips curved slightly at his boldness. "You do not fear their judgment?" He shook his head. "I fear nothing but silence, Princess. If your people refuse to hear, they lose the chance to learn. I would rather they hate me for honesty than admire me for lies." Lithara walked slowly among the glowing flowers, her hands brushing their crystal petals. "You speak with such certainty, Captain. It is unsettling. My people measure their words carefully. We fear missteps. Yet you throw your words into the air as though each one carries no weight." "On the contrary," Holt said softly, "each word carries weight. But if we are too afraid to speak, we carry nothing at all." His answer struck her with quiet force. She paused, turning to face him fully. For the first time, she felt a strange warmth stir within her chest, a feeling she could not name but could not ignore. She saw not just an envoy before her, but a man who believed in something greater than caution. Before she could respond, a sharp voice called from the edge of the garden. One of her advisors had followed her, his jeweled mask gleaming in the dim light. "Your Highness," he said sternly, bowing with stiff formality, "you should not linger here. The council awaits your presence. And you—" His masked face turned toward Holt. "Remember your place. You are a guest, not a teacher." Lithera's gaze hardened. "Enough," she said, her voice carrying sudden authority. "I will attend the council when I am ready. Leave us." The advisor hesitated, clearly torn between obedience and his desire to argue. At last he bowed again, though his movements were sharp with anger, and withdrew into the shadows. Holt gave a quiet chuckle. "I don't think he likes me very much." Lithera's stern expression softened into a rare smile. "Few in my court like anyone who challenges them. That is why they surround themselves with silence." The princess and the captain stood together beneath the glowing canopy, and for the first time, Lithara felt a dangerous thought forming in her heart. What if the humans were not simply guests? What if they were exactly what her empire needed? A spark to break through centuries of caution and fear. Later that night, the council gathered in the high chamber of crystal. Nobles lined the walls, their voices sharp as they spoke against the humans. They claimed the princess had been deceived. They argued that humans were too wild, too unpredictable. Some even demanded that the alliance be reconsidered. Lithara listened to them, her face calm, but inside her heart was firm. When they finally turned to her for a decision, she rose from her seat and spoke with clarity. You call them reckless, she said, her voice echoing against the crystal walls. You call them dangerous. Perhaps they are. But I see in them something we have forgotten, a strength we lost when we chose safety over struggle. I will not silence them. I will not dismiss them. Humanity is here and I will hear them. Her words silenced the chamber. Some nobles bowed their heads in anger, others in reluctant respect. But none could deny the resolve in her voice. Captain Holt, standing among his officers at the edge of the chamber, said nothing. But his eyes met hers across the vast room, and in that silent moment, an unspoken bond was sealed. Neither of them knew it yet. But the path they had begun to walk would not end with simple questions or curious answers. It would lead them into storms neither empire had yet faced. The days grew heavier within the palace walls. Princess Lithara's words before the council had silenced them for a time, but silence was not the same as peace. Beneath the polished crystal floors and jeweled masks, the nobles whispered still. They spoke of her fascination with the humans as a weakness. They said she was blinded by curiosity, perhaps even manipulated by the alien envoy. And though none dared speak against her openly, Lithara could feel the shifting weight of their mistrust. Captain Holt, too, felt the change. Wherever he walked, he was met with stares, not of curiosity now, but of suspicion. The courtiers bowed out of duty, yet their eyes followed him with cold judgment. His words had struck too deep, his honesty too sharp. To some, he had become a threat. One evening, Lithara called him to her private chamber of stars, a circular hall at the top of the palace, where the ceiling opened to reveal the endless sky. There, they could see the twin moons rising over the city, casting silver light across the empire's glittering spires. She stood at the balcony, her robes flowing in the night wind, when Holt entered. For a long moment she said nothing. She only stared at the horizon, her hands clasped before her. "They fear you," she said at last, her voice soft, yet edged with something heavier. "And because I listened to you, they now fear me." Holt approached slowly, his boots echoing against the crystal floor. "Fear can be useful," he said. "It means they know change is coming. And change is always frightening." She turned to look at him, her violet eyes reflecting the moonlight. "Change, yes. But fear also breeds betrayal. My court is not united. I can feel the fractures widening. Some of them would rather see me silenced than see me stand beside you." Holt studied her for a moment, his face calm but his jaw tight. "Then you'll need to decide who you can trust, and who you cannot." The words carried a weight that lingered between them. Lithara turned back to the stars, her mind restless. She had always believed her people noble, their traditions sacred. But now she began to see those traditions as chains binding them to stillness. And in the stillness she saw rot. The next day, the fracture revealed itself more clearly. During a council session, one of the elder nobles stepped forward, his jeweled mask removed, a rare sign of open defiance. His sharp features twisted with disdain as he addressed her. "Your Highness," he said boldly, "we can no longer stand by while you drag this empire into danger. You invite humans into our halls, you give weight to their wild claims, and you dare to praise their chaos as strength. This is not the way of the Veari. You risk everything we are." Gasps filled the chamber. To speak so openly against the princess was near treason. Yet others in the council did not stop him. Some even nodded in secret agreement. Lithara rose from her seat, her voice calm but firm. "And what would you have me do, Lord Serath? Turn away from knowledge? Refuse to see the truth of the galaxy? Beyond our walls, fear has ruled us for too long." Serath's eyes narrowed. "No, princess. Wisdom has ruled us. Discipline has protected us. We survive not by reckless fire, but by measured control. These humans are dangerous, and you are blind to it. If you cannot see this, then perhaps you are unfit to rule." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some shouted in outrage at his words. Others remained silent, their silence speaking louder than any voice. Holt stood at the side, his hands clenched at his back, his expression unreadable. For the first time, Lithara felt the full weight of betrayal. These were not just whispers in the corridors. This was an open challenge to her authority. And though she held herself tall, inside her chest burned with anger and sorrow. That night she walked the palace halls alone. Guards followed at a distance, but she felt no comfort from their presence. Her thoughts churned like storm clouds. The humans had shown her resilience, had opened her eyes to strength she had never considered. But now her own people questioned her right to rule because she dared to see differently. Holt found her in the lower gardens, staring at the reflection of the moons in the crystal pools. He approached quietly, standing beside her without speaking for a long moment. Finally he said, "They won't stop. You know that, don't you? Once fear takes root, it grows." She closed her eyes briefly. "Yes, and still I cannot turn away, not now. Not after what I have seen." He looked at her, his gaze steady. "Then you'll have to be ready to fight for it. Not just with words, with everything." Lithera met his eyes, and in that moment she understood. The path ahead would not be filled with debate and reason alone. It would be carved through resistance, through betrayal, and perhaps through blood. Her people were not ready to accept change, but she was no longer willing to accept stillness. Above them, the moons drifted apart in the sky, their silver light casting long shadows across the garden. Shadows that hinted at trials yet to come, and deep within her heart, Princess Lithara felt the fire of resolve burn brighter than ever before. The tension within the palace had reached its breaking point. Princess Lithara could feel it in the air, sharp as a blade. Courtiers no longer whispered only in shadows. They murmured openly now. Their jeweled masks turned away when she passed. Their silence during council meetings spoke louder than words. The trust she once held from her people was slipping, not because of weakness in her rule, but because of her refusal to turn away from the humans. But betrayal from within was not the only storm gathering. At the edge of the empire, a new shadow was approaching. The Kraith horde, old enemies of both Veyari and human colonies, had begun moving through the stars. The first reports came quietly. Outposts lost, ships destroyed. At first, the council dismissed them as rumors. Then the news grew undeniable. The Kraith had returned, and they were coming for the empire. One evening, Lithera summoned Captain Holt to her private chamber again. He found her pacing beneath the star-filled ceiling, her face pale but her eyes sharp with resolve. "The Kraith are here," she said without greeting. "The council wishes to pretend we can hold them back with our fleets. But I have seen the reports. They are stronger than before. More cunning. If we fight as we always have, we will break." Holt listened carefully, his jaw tightening. "And your people's way is discipline and order," he said quietly. "But the Kraith thrive on breaking order. They don't follow rules, Princess. They tear through them." She stopped pacing and looked at him, her voice lower, almost hesitant. "Then I must ask, what would your people do?" For a moment, Holt said nothing. He looked out at the stars, as if searching for the right words. Then he turned back, his voice calm but firm. "We adapt. We don't wait for the perfect plan. We change as the fight changes. Sometimes that means chaos. Sometimes it means sacrifice. But it always means pushing forward when the enemy thinks we've fallen." His words stirred something deep inside her. The very thing her people feared, human unpredictability, might be the only thing that could save them now. The next day, Lithera stood before the council. Her voice rang clear across the crystal chamber. "The Kraith horde advances," she declared. "We cannot face them with rigid lines and careful steps. They will cut through us as fire cuts through dry wood. We need a new way. We need the humans." Outrage exploded instantly. Nobles shouted, their jeweled masks flashing with anger. Some called her reckless, others accused her of betraying the empire. One elder even stepped forward, his voice shaking with fury. "You would place our fate in the hands of aliens? You would abandon centuries of discipline for the chaos of a lesser race?" Lithara's voice did not waver. "I would place our fate in the hands of survival. If we cling to pride and tradition, we will fall, but with them we may yet endure." The chamber split. Some remained silent, unwilling to support her, while others muttered bitterly under their breath. The council gave no agreement, only resistance. Yet Lithara had made her choice. That night, in the palace war chamber, she met with Holt and his officers in secret. Holograms of enemy fleets shimmered above the table, showing the Kraith closing in on the capital. "They strike hard and fast," Holt said, pointing to the glowing models. "Your fleets are strong, but too slow. They'll be outmaneuvered before they can even respond." Lithara listened closely, her advisors absent by her own command. For the first time, she relied not on the old voices of her court, but on this human captain who spoke with clarity and fire. "What would you suggest?" she asked. Holt's eyes met hers. "Small mobile teams. Hit them where they don't expect. Disrupt their supply lines. Turn their strength into weakness. Your people can hold the line, but we'll break their spine from the shadows." It was a daring plan, It was not the way of the Veyari, who believed in careful formations and strict control, but Lithara felt the truth in it. The Kraith could not be beaten with tradition. They could only be beaten with something new. She gave a slow nod. Then it will be done. I will see to it myself. The following days were filled with quiet preparation. Holt and his humans worked alongside select Veyari soldiers willing to adapt, training them in new methods, quick strikes, sudden retreats, constant movement. At first the Veyari struggled, unused to breaking their discipline. But Holt's determination was unshakable. He pushed them, guided them, and reminded them that survival was worth discomfort. Lithara watched from the shadows as her soldiers slowly changed. For the first time, she saw them move not as glass blades ready to shatter, but as fire, spreading and adapting. She felt pride swell within her chest, but shadows still lingered. She knew not every noble would stand by her choice. Some would see this alliance as betrayal, as proof she had abandoned their ways. She could almost feel the knives sharpening behind her back. Yet when she looked at Holt, standing tall as he trained her people, she felt a steady strength. He was not of her world, not of her empire, but his presence burned away her fear. The Kraith were coming. The council was divided. Betrayal whispered in the dark. But Lithara had made her choice, and there was no turning back. The fate of her people would be bound to humanity's fire. The stars burned cold and distant, yet every ship in the Veyari fleet felt the heat of tension. The Kraith horde had arrived. Their vessels poured out of hyperspace like a storm of jagged shadows, their hulls bristling with weapons. The void itself seemed to tremble beneath their advance. For the first time in generations, the capital system faced a threat that even the proudest nobles could not dismiss. Princess Lithara stood at the command bridge of her flagship, her tall figure outlined by the glow of the star maps. Around her, officers reported enemy numbers, their voices clipped but tight with strain. The Kraith outnumbered them. Their formation spread wide, seeking to encircle the Veyari defenses. Tradition said to form lines to hold and repel, but Lithara remembered Holt's words. Rigid lines would shatter. She turned sharply. Signal the fleet. Break the formations. Scatter them into clusters. Hold the enemy where you can, but yield ground if you must. Do not cling to position. Survive, adapt, endure. Gasps and uneasy glances passed through her crew. Never had a royal given such an order. But her voice carried such fire that hesitation fell away. Commands flew across channels, and the fleet began to shift like living fragments instead of a rigid wall. Meanwhile, Captain Holt and his team launched from the hangar in a strike cruiser painted in human colors. He sat at the controls with steady hands, his eyes hard with focus. We know our job, he told his squad, a mix of humans and Veyari volunteers. The princess holds their attention. We take their heart. We go for the supply ships and command vessels. Break their spine. The small ship darted into the chaos, weaving between massive enemy warcraft. Holt's team struck fast, hurling torpedoes into weak points, crippling Kraith engines, and vanishing before counterfire could lock on. Each strike forced the horde to stumble, their advance losing rhythm. Lithara watched from her flagship, her heart pounding as updates came in. Holt's squad was tearing through the horde's rear lines, cutting fuel carriers, scattering escorts. Where once the Kraith swept forward with unstoppable momentum, now their assault faltered, broken into uneven surges. But the enemy was not blind. Soon dozens of Kraith fighters peeled away, hunting Holt's strike team. His cruiser shook violently as blasts tore through the void around them. Warning lights flared red, and one of the Veyari volunteers cried out as their shields buckled. Keep it together, Holt barked, steering hard into a dense asteroid belt. The Kraith followed, their jagged ships scraping and breaking against stone as they pursued. Holt used the chaos to loop back, striking again where they least expected. It was dangerous. Every second could be their last. But it was also the chaos humans thrived on. Back at the capital, the battle grew desperate. The Veyari fleet was scattered into small clusters, and though they fought bravely, they bled under the relentless storm. One noble commander broke ranks entirely, retreating against Lithara's orders, leaving an entire sector exposed. The Kraith surged into the gap, aiming straight for the princess's flagship. Lithara felt fear not in her chest, but she did not falter. She turned to her crew. Prepare all weapons. If they want me, they will find I am no easy prize. Her voice was steady, her hands strong upon the controls. The officers rallied behind her, their fear dissolving into determination. For the first time, they saw not only a princess but a commander. The Kraith ships closed in, black shadows against the stars. Just as their weapons flared to strike, a sudden explosion tore through their flank. Holt's cruiser burst from the asteroid belt, damaged but still fighting, its cannons blazing into the enemy line. "Thought I'd let you handle this alone." Holt's voice came through the comms, rough but steady. Lythara felt a surge of relief, though she kept her composure. With Holt's team hitting from behind and her fleet striking from the front, the Kraith wedge crumbled. Enemy ships spun out of formation, colliding with one another, leaving gaps wide enough for the Veyari to counterattack. Hours passed in a storm of fire and steel. Ship after ship fell, debris scattering like burning rain across the void. The Veyari paid dearly, but they endured. Holt's strikes kept the enemy fractured, while Lythara's leadership held her people together through the chaos. Finally, as the last light of the enemy flagship burned out and its hull split apart, silence fell across the stars. The Kraith fleet, once unstoppable, now lay in ruins, survivors scattered into the void, fleeing back into the darkness. On the bridge of her flagship, Lythara stood tall, her hands trembling only when no one could see. The cost had been heavy. Too many ships gone, too many lives lost, but they had survived. Against the odds, against tradition, against fear, they had survived. Holt's battered cruiser docked with the flagship, and when he stepped onto the bridge, Lythara turned to face him. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. He was exhausted, his uniform torn, his face smudged with soot, yet his eyes still held the same unshakable fire. "You were right," she said softly, her voice carrying across the hushed room. "Without change, we would have fallen. Without you, I would have fallen." Holt shook his head, managing a tired smile. "No, Princess. You didn't fall. You stood. All I did was remind you how." The crew watched in silence, some still uncertain, some with quiet awe. For the first time, Veyari officers looked upon a human not with suspicion, but with respect. The princess's choice, once doubted, had saved them all. But in the shadows of the galaxy, the Kraith survivors were not gone. They would regroup. They would return. And now Lythara knew the true test had only just begun. The war was over, but silence felt heavier than the clash of battle. Across the Empire, the stars carried the news of victory, though no one celebrated loudly. The Veyari had survived, but the cost was carved into their hearts. Whole fleets lay in ruins, families mourned their dead, and the capital's skies were filled with the fire of wreckage still burning as it fell. Princess Lythara walked the marble halls of her palace, each step echoing in the quiet. She wore no crown that day, only plain silver robes, as if to show that she was not only a princess but a servant of her people. Courtiers lined the walls as she passed, some bowing with respect, others watching in silence, their eyes still filled with doubt. She had saved them, yet tradition was not so easily undone. At the grand balcony, she stopped and looked out at the city. Towers stretched toward the heavens, their crystalline spires cracked from the vibrations of the battle. Citizens gathered below, their faces lifted toward her. They waited not for a speech of pride, but for an answer. What came next? Her voice carried over the square. "My people, we have endured what many thought impossible. The Kraith came to destroy us, and yet we stand. We do not stand unchanged. We do not stand without scars, but we stand." Her gaze swept across them, steady and unyielding. "You doubted me when I turned to the humans. Some still doubt. But know this, without them, we would not be here today. Their fire became our fire. Their strength became our strength. And if we are to survive the storms yet to come, we must walk with them, not apart from them." The crowd was silent for a long moment. Then slowly voices rose, some in agreement, some in protest. Yet above all, she felt something new. Not unity yet, not trust fully earned, but a seed planted in the soil of tradition. That seed she knew would grow. Later, in the quiet of the war chamber, Lythara found Holt staring at the holographic stars. His uniform had been replaced with simple garments, but the exhaustion still lingered on him. He did not look like a hero, only a man who had given everything he could and survived by will alone. "You're thinking of leaving," she said softly, stepping closer. Holt glanced at her, then back at the stars. "Your people don't need me anymore. They need you. If I stay, some will never accept your rule. They'll see me as the foreign shadow behind your throne." She was silent, her hands clasped before her. Part of her knew he spoke truth. But another part, the part that had seen him fight beside her, the part that had leaned on his fire when her own wavered, refused to let go so easily. "You're wrong," she said finally. "They may never all accept you, but they will learn to accept what I choose, and I choose this alliance. I choose what we have built together. Without it, I am only a ruler bound in chains of old ways. With it, I am something more." He studied her face for a long time, his eyes searching for any trace of doubt. There was none. He gave a tired smile, one corner of his mouth lifting. "You always did have more steel in you than the others gave you credit for." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of her advisors. Some bowed low, their voices respectful at last. Others still glared from behind jeweled masks. One elder stepped forward, his tone careful but heavy. "Princess, the council has spoken. They recognize your leadership and your victory. You will remain on the throne, but they demand that no human holds command over our fleets." Lithara's gaze hardened, though she gave no sign of anger. "Then hear me," she replied, her voice cutting through the chamber. "Captain Holt does not need command to be my ally. His place is not above us, but beside us. You may keep your fleets. I will keep the fire that saved them." The elder bowed, his silence conceding the argument. One by one, the council withdrew, leaving the chamber quiet again. Holt gave a low chuckle. "You handled that better than I ever could." She looked at him with calm eyes. "No, Captain. We handled it together." In the days that followed, humans and Veyari began to rebuild side by side. It was not easy. There were arguments, missteps, and deep mistrust that could not vanish in a season, but there were also small signs of change. A human mechanic repairing a Veyari ship, a Veyari healer tending to a wounded human soldier, children from both worlds laughing as they played in the palace gardens. Each small act was a thread, and together those threads began to weave a new future. One night, as Lithara stood once more beneath the stars, Holt came to her side. Neither spoke for a long time. They simply looked out at the galaxy, vast and uncertain but no longer frightening. Finally, Lithara broke the silence. "When the Kraith return, as they surely will, do you think we will be ready?" Holt crossed his arms, his gaze steady. "If you lead and we stand together, then yes. We'll be ready for whatever comes." She turned her face toward him, the faintest of smiles touching her lips. For the first time since the war began, hope stirred in her heart. Not fragile hope, but strong, living hope. The kind that could outlast even the darkest storm. And as the stars shone above them, brighter than ever, the princess and the human knew one truth that would echo through history. Humanity and Veyari, once divided, had found strength not in their differences, but in standing together. The galaxy would never be the same.